right, good people. Welcome back to our Mix What I Like. Let's get into this. Abu Shawarib, forgive me if I mispronounced that. Welcome to the program. Dev Springer, welcome to the program. Dev, please introduce our guests for us and maybe clear up my mispronunciation. And let's get into this discussion of Farha, Palestine, and beyond. Welcome to the both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me back on, Jared. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi to everybody in the chat listening right now. We have with us today my good comrade, my good friend, going on almost 10 years now, Abu Shawarib. And I won't give you a full bio on Abu because he's the kind of person who has done a little bit of everything. But he is a doctor here in the metro Atlanta area, an abolitionist organizer, Palestinian community member who has also went and helped given medicine in Palestinian refugee camps, among other areas. And also helps lead some street medicine initiatives here in Atlanta as well, helping people who live, dwell, and work on the streets receive medical care. And beyond that, is just a really dope person and one of my best friends. So what's up, Abu? How you doing today?
Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very humbled to be on. Big fan of the show. And yeah, I'm like Devin said, incredible. I'm a Palestinian American ER doc. I'm a hardcore harm reductionist, a street medic. I'm working for incarcerated folks, street workers, and unsheltered folks. I just want to start by saying peace, love, and power to Mumia Abu Jamal and the Free Mumia movement. It was a pleasure and an honor, honestly, to hear from him, and to be on the same stream is a high honor. So free him from unjust detention and free all those incarcerated in unjust conditions and racist state violence. Thanks for having me.
No, right on. It's an honor to have you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much. And yeah, that was, and it's crazy to hear how strong he sounds given the conditions. That, I mean, it's amazing. So that was great. But I was thinking, you know, as a segue, that his political imprisonment is extrapolated to an entire nation of Palestinian people, which is the context for this film. And again, as I was saying the other day, I haven't been moved in this way. I haven't felt this way since Rabbit Proof Fences. That's the last film that had me this kind of emotional in watching the you know. So I'll let you all set it up, and I'll only just say that again, aside from the politics, this is a very well made, well acted, well scripted, paced. Everything about the film I thought was fantastic. Shot, it's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I was really pleasantly surprised on that note, as much as I was just gut punched at the content. I did read a couple articles that I do want to talk about in terms of the discussion about the film, broadly speaking, but I want the two of you to sort of lay out the history of the film, what it's talking about, some of the, and whatever else about the film you all would like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Abu, do you want to go first and take it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I feel like the quality of production for this film was kind of unprecedented for even me as like an Arab American to see on screen, to see on mainstream streaming platforms. I think that in terms of like our representation in mainstream media and our narratives being elevated in the mainstream, this was remarkable both on like the production side and like you were saying, the actual plot and storytelling. My first thoughts watching the movie were actually one of relatability. Having not seen much like actual production depicting the like the raw reality of the Nakba, it was first part of the movie, a feeling of relatability, seeing depictions of Palestinians in a time that I've not really seen depicted in the early days of occupation prior to the first Intifada. they looked like pictures of my grandfathers and my family members, like in their dress, in their demeanor. And it was things that I only really seen in pictures. And so I was first gripped by the relatability of it. And then as the atrocities unfolded, it hurt even more and more. And so I had actually never seen a film or a television production, like I said, depicting the Nakba. And that was kind of my initial thoughts, was first of relatability, and then to really feeling the catastrophe depicted later in the film.
Yeah, and you know, I'll piggyback off of that. And the director of, and for everyone listening, it's gonna be hella spoilers, because I don't believe in spoilers. I think you're grown, you can listen to some shit and still watch something later and you'll be fine. But you know, I was reading an interview with the director, Dareen Salam, and she said that she called it a blind spot in cinema history, this period of Palestine's history. She said that, like, in cinema, there's just a complete blind spot for any depiction of the Nakba, especially the early days, the days before the, you know, his invasion, essentially. And so when I read that, because I had to, the film was very heavy and I had to watch it in 2 sittings. And when I read that in between both sittings, you know, it kind of made me realize, like, wow, this is, not only is this a historical deficit, but it's an intentional deficit, right? Because we know there's like a massive, massive campaign to erase and to slaughter Palestinian history, true Palestinian history, very much in the same way for us as Black people. We know that there's historical misinformation, historical erasure, and of course, historical denial as well, right? And so I watched it and I felt that sentiment, like it felt important to see this, knowing that context, you know what I mean? And I think that when people watch it, they'll kind of be shocked that the film caused as much backlash in Israeli circles and Israeli sphere as much as it did, because even the depiction we're given in the film itself, compared to real life testimonies of the Nakba, is actually a relatively tame depiction. In fact, even the actual real events which she's depicting in the film are somewhat tamed to how they likely occurred in real life, right? And even at the most climactic scene, which maybe I won't ruin that specific scene, but even at that specific scene, the camera does not actually show and depict the slaughtering of a Palestinian family. And so I think it's a testament that even when you're as careful as possible and you don't show your people, she doesn't show Palestinians as helpless victims who are just running around crying, crazy. You know, there is a victimhood at play, but she really shows them in an empowered and honest and truthful way, and still, despite all of that, received all the backlash that she possibly could. So those are some of my like initial thoughts. You know, I also imagine people like yourself, Jared, who have children, especially daughters, and the whole film being from the perspective entirely start to finish of this 14-year-old girl. I could only imagine it makes, especially if you have children, it makes it even that much more impactful to watch.
Yeah, I don't know how that works in terms of you know, how that, you know, that's how I felt. And that's why I compared it to Rabbit Proof Fences, because of the same, you know, and I happened to watch that right after my first daughter was born. And that I'll never get over that. And I can't watch that film ever again. Like, I probably can't watch Farha again. I don't know how I don't think I could watch it again. And it took me, I had to consciously make myself not, because I kept wanting to, all I kept thinking of was the father who leaves and locks her in the room. I kept thinking, I had to consciously say, watch the film and allow yourself to see it from this girl's perspective, as the film intends. Because I kept drifting off to, where is the father? What, he must be losing his mind if he isn't, I mean, if he isn't dead already. But you know, it's like, how could you, in that decision of that you know, that beloved decision, do I take my child with me as opposed to allowing them being enslaved? is, I mean, it's just too much. It's just, and you know, I couldn't help but doing that whole thing of what would I do and how would I deal with this and how would I feel and how am I feeling and all this. It's very difficult. So selfishly, I just can't handle it. So even when somebody's in the chat saying I need to watch Will Smith's Emancipation, you know, I even called it up the other day, and before I'm just not, one, I don't think I'm over Will Smith as a human being, and I can't detach him from the movie. But it's just, I got to get into space for it. It's just a lot. But to your point, the film, and this was even in something that I'll pull up here. One of the articles I read from Monda Weiss, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, said Netflix's Farha is a mild depiction of the Nakba. And I think that the filmmaker went, whose name I should have on the top of my tongue, but the whatever the Israeli defenders or Zionist defenders or whoever want to say, I mean, the film clearly does not do, like, there's no, what do they say? There's no sugar added. You know what I mean? Like, they even try to humanize the one soldier charged with killing the baby. Like showing that moment of, oh, I can't do it. I'm gonna just leave it to die. Like, you know, slightly better, slightly one step above the full barbarousness of it all. Yeah. I mean, and anyway, so go ahead. But anyway, I'll come back to this article. Let me just stop talking.
No. I mean, I read that same article from Monda Weiss. I love Monda Weiss. Shout out to Monda Weiss. They do great coverage of Palestine. You know, I think that there's like a subtlety to the film that actually speaks quite loudly, right? Like, on what appears to be a minimal budget. This isn't some massive Disney production with like $50 million. It largely takes place in 3 settings, right? Their house, the room that she's locked in for the whole movie, and then some, you know, outside street scenes. It only takes place in 3 main settings, but with minimal budget and all of these things, because this is a story that the director, Doreen, this is literally within her family, been passed from her grandmother, right? It was her grandmother's childhood best friend that this happened to. And that story, like many Palestinian stories, has been passed down. And so there's like a subtlety and a nuance and a very personal touch throughout the entire thing. Like, I noticed when she is locked into this room for so long, there's a lot of symbolism. She survives by eating these jars of olives that she finds and drinking the olive juice. And olives in Palestinian culture, as Abu will probably tell you, have huge significance, especially right now as Israel is demolishing hundreds of acres of olive farms every day, right? There was a moment where she's talking to the soldiers, the wife, and she pulls the key out of her shirt. And the soldier hands her back the key and says, here, take it as a souvenir, keep it as a souvenir. And, you know, Palestinians, many elder Palestinians still have their original keys from their original homes. And in fact, in DC at the Museum of the Palestinian People, you can see those original keys on display. And so there's these little moments like that are like, it proves only a Palestinian or someone deeply related to this story could have covered it as accurately as this. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, because I had heard about the online backlash for the film before watching it, I anticipated a movie, something like The Great Debaters, you know, where, putting it in Black terms, I'm thinking like it's just about to be this horrible plot, inaccurate, politically inaccurate. The Black people, aka the Palestinians in this situation, are going to be shown docile and just taking a beat. You know what I mean? I just expected all of the worst to come. And then I watched it and it was none of those things at all, right? And so I think that in and of itself is a really important lesson.
Right on. Abu, feel free to jump in at any point. I did want to. I mean, I did want to. There's a lot from. I just read 2 articles from Manda Weiss. How do you say it? I don't even.
Manda Weiss.
Manda Weiss, and which were fascinating. And I'll just. Well, one of the things I thought was interesting was Israel's response to the film. Last month, Israeli Finance Minister Avigdor Lieberman told the Treasury to revoke any government funding going to Al Saraya Theater in Jaffa over scheduled screenings of the film. The decision of a cultural institution budgeted by the state to screen the movie is an unacceptable move that requires it takes all the possible steps, including denying it funds, with the goal of preventing the screening of this shocking film or other similar ones in the future, said Lieberman. That was the line I thought was the funniest part. You know, funny with all the puns or whatever intended, whatever. Similar ones in the future, like anything like it, you know, we don't want. Israel is a place to present Israeli and international works, but is certainly not the place to slander IDF soldiers and the security forces who are acting day and night to defend and protect all the citizens and residents living there. You know, the article goes on to share some of what you've all alluded to, that what is depicted in the film is light relative to what actually happened, could be or is happening even. And so I think I'll let folks. I'll put the links in the description. I'll let folks read for themselves because it gets pretty graphic. It's a lot. So I rather than read it or share, I'm going to let folks do. But just that even in, you know, all that's going on here in terms of Black and Jews and depictions of symbolic representations and media and all this other stuff, I found that, you know, particularly interesting as a response that even this is going too far, and any film even in the future that heads in this direction must be stopped, budgets pulled, telling people to cancel Netflix, which I think is just, I mean, it's just so much. Anyway, if it was ironic, it would be hilarious, but it's, you know, anyway.
Well, it is ironic because for about a decade now, we have gotten billions of dollars worth of Israeli propaganda on Netflix at every single turn and corner possible. Right. So it would be a lot less ironic if there wasn't this massive machinery of Israeli propaganda that's already embedded in Netflix to begin with. I think that is, you know, the starting point is like how many Mossad agents sneaking into Palestine to get some secret terrorist is there. How that same exact plot has been repeated at least a dozen times on Netflix alone, not even including other studios. We're only even talking about Netflix. So the fact that this one film created such a backlash, it's the fear of a good example, right? And the fear of the truth. And I think to your point, Jared, earlier about, you know, like making difficult choices, there were several instances in the film. The very first one was when Farha jumps out of the car with her uncle to run to her father, and the uncle has to continue driving because he has his wife and child in the car.
And the father tells him to go and says, my daughter's staying with me.
And then, so I think about that choice. I think about the choice of the father to leave his daughter. I think about the choice of the man whose wife was giving birth, who hears Farha and is about to open the door and let her out. I mean, these are all, when we think of a catastrophe as apocalyptic as the Nakba, these are the choices that quite literally every single person who was displaced or harmed in some kind of way had to make. Whether you're a 12-year-old girl, right? She's having to make choices for her survival, or whether you're like the adults, you know, even in the opening scenes of the film, we see Palestinian militias coming and asking the father, will you join us in this fight? Shit's about to pop off. That's the condensed version of what they basically say, right? And so he's making a choice right there. He says, no, I'm a peaceful man. My job is to take care of this village, and that's it. Later, he had to pick up arms, you know, but it's all about these choices individuals are forced to make due to this colonial settler state apparatus that is coming and mowing people over. And I think, just like you said, people with children or anyone with any ounce of empathy are going to watch the film and ask, what the heck, what would I do? You know, and then ultimately the elephant in the room, then Palestinian resistance makes a lot more fucking sense when you see shit like that.
Oh no, I mean, not that I wasn't already here, but this is what this is the other thing I was thinking. Like, let's just be real for a second. Try to put some of my own emotions aside for a second. There's never going to be forgiveness. Like, I'm never forgiving. Like this didn't even happen to me, and I'm never forgiving. You know what I'm saying? Like, this just not. There's no forgiving. So we're past that. So what do we do now? Like, so for real, like, if we really want to get to a point where people live in peace and our great grandchildren live in peace, then we have to make real material adjustments, and real shifts of power have to occur. That's it. And we just have to do it understanding we're not going to be forgiven. I'm not forgiving you. You're not forgiving me. We're not going to be friends. It's just I'm never getting over it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, and stop asking me to. Like, don't ever ask me to get over that. Because then I'm just going to get angry all over again. So, but even in the response to the film, you can see there's no interest in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to the point of where we keep going back to with all of our political conclusions is that's where we are. Like, we're dealing with people that they don't care. They don't care.
Yeah.
And so what? Woo! I don't even.
Well, I want to touch on the character as well, who was a Palestinian informant for the at the time of the Nakba, the newly formed Israeli Defense Forces. But before I get to that, I wanted to actually ask you, Abu. I'm curious. I've heard like differing opinions from people. Some have said that a film like this wouldn't really even permeate Zionist society in Palestine, that they live almost in a bubble. A large portion of the population are this bubble of like a mixture of not being aware and thinking you're like God's chosen people for this land, and this very thick film of propaganda is like what the majority of these settlers live under. And so I'm curious, you know, knowing your time there and your time in Palestine was spent partially in refugee camps as well. So you've seen like a full spectrum, you know. I'm curious what do you think a response to a film like this is right now over there? And what kind of impact do you think it would have?
Yeah, definitely. So just along the lines of what you all had mentioned earlier, that there's this almost a media blind spot, like a huge Hollywood blind spot on depicting these events. But I feel like it's also something that Native Americans might be able to relate to, like indigenous folks here in the Americas might be able to relate to when, for example, they see like a tumbleweed, you know, passing through the Wild West in Western films. And it's just like, oh yeah, there was just nothing here, you know, like there's just a tumbleweed rolling through, and then, you know, like white conquerors kind of moving west, and there was nothing there. And so to a certain extent, I feel like this has also been the approach in like Israeli media productions. It's just like, oh, there was nothing here, and we came to establish a state, which makes what you're describing actually a lot easier, you know, like putting on those blinders, having that film. I mean, for God's sake, there's literally a wall that stops you from seeing atrocities on the other side if you're living within mainland Israel. But outside of that, even within, I don't know if is this Dr. Ball still with us? Even being in Palestine, you know, like on the conversation of forgiveness, you know, it's you know, talking about forgiveness in this context for the Nakba itself as an individual event is better informed by the fact that it's ongoing in a lot of ways. For example, currently there are movement restrictions, barricades, apartheid wall, checkpoints, which would very likely result in the same outcome for the birthing mother that you see in the movie. than the one that was what was depicted in the film, the mother giving birth in unsafe conditions, kind of hurriedly under great duress, is very much an experience ongoing today for those attempting to cross checkpoints, for those attempting to seek medical care, not just in childbirth, but anything from like medical emergencies. Ambulances in the West Bank and Palestinian territories and Gaza are regularly obstructed at checkpoints, harassed by people at checkpoints, and a lot of times folks are in critical conditions when this is happening. So to a certain extent, we saw such a bare and naked reality, like literally a soldier about to like smother a child directly, but then also that same smothering is occurring all the time in life under occupation. And what you see when you go there is people in the same way that Farha is just trying to aspire to the things that you imagine any regular 14-year-old is attempting to aspire to. That's still what life for Palestinians is like. They're still pursuing education. They still have dreams, aspirations for not only their nation, but also for themselves, their families. But all of that is happening with this overcast of occupation and this like direct obstruction of occupation that not only stops like you from getting medical care when you need it in an emergency, or even visiting your primary care clinic when it's not an emergency, but impacts society as a whole on the day-to-day. And so when it comes to talking about forgiveness, I think the conversation about what do we do now comes first, because it's still ongoing. It's like hard to forgive when it's still actively being carried out. And another point, I think, regarding how I might imagine folks in Israel perceive this movie. It's interesting, the quote that we pulled up earlier from the article states that, like state media officials endorse, like the IDF and want to uphold their image as a positive force. However, what happens when that same armed force is the one carrying out ethnic cleansing? We end up getting all of these productions, like you were saying, on Netflix, like Folda or others that, like depict whatever machismo cop type movie that shows them like firing at the bad guys, Palestinians. I think that there's like an interest in bolstering films that depict the armed forces in this way, when in reality, you saw there's backlash when the ethnic cleansing they are tasked with carrying out is also revealed. So I feel like I actually feel like there would be an audience for this movie in Israel. I feel like it's part of a bigger conversation to shift the tide, both here like domestically and abroad. And I'm looking forward to seeing more like this film.
Well, look, I mean, even the Hulk says it should be seen. Even Mark Ruffalo said he supports the film. So if the Hulk says go watch, what else can anybody? I mean,
nah, Mark Ruffalo. Fuck Mark Ruffalo, because I can't stand that man, because a few years ago, he was saying some Free Palestine shit, and we were all like, oh, okay, this is cool. You're a very big actor with a very big reach to be saying Free Palestine. And he got an iota of pushback and instantly put out this like apology, doing all this both sides stuff. And he's very like radical liberal, and he picks and chooses when he wants to be Free Palestine. But the second them people at Disney and Marvel give him that phone call, he puts them Twitter fingers down and shuts the fuck up. So no, I don't fuck Mark Ruffalo. I'm so over that man. He tries to both sides the Palestine struggle all the time.
I just couldn't believe. I'm shocked that you are not supportive of the Hulk supporting this film. But Abu, you raised something that I'm glad you brought up. A couple things. One, the storyline of that just shows, Palestinian children playing and girls dreaming about a future, and one wanting to have an academic, intellectual career, et cetera, and so forth. I thought was important. I admit though, when with that one little thread of her resisting and even one of these Mandawis articles points out that the resisting the old traditional patriarchy. I'm like, yeah, that's good. I know in general that's good, but I did for that one brief moment, I got pulled out of the film into today's, again, what I'm agreeing with, the, you know, the woke imperium thing. Like, oh, are you trying to appease the Western audience? Are you trying to like, are they going too far now to not get the backlash? That was the only one little part. Although, but I think it's a legit thing. I mean, so it's just in this today's climate over here, it just was one little thing that I was like, but I was glad at the, you know, but at the same time, I was glad to see it, because you don't get to see Palestinians and most of the world's people depicted in any other way, you know, than what we're used to. So that was, I thought that was good, but
yeah.
Anyway.
No, I just wanted to, I think that the little girl wanted to, she's not a little girl, I guess she was like 14, but she wanted to go to university. Mm-hmm. And what we find out is her father's hesitancy had less to do with gender and more to do with the fact that he knew that this war was coming. And
right. That's right.
Do I send my daughter further away where she may be safer and further from the violence? Do I keep her here with me and try to protect her? You know, these are the choices people were forced to make.
Right.
Like we think about mothers of children, you know, on the slave ships coming over here and the choices that they had to make, right? And we know that's very well documented. And these choices are themselves lasting trauma that creates generational trauma. And one thing that I found, again, this is ongoing, and the film all it does is give us a frame into the history to see how we got to where we are today. The same exact thing is taking place. The technologies have upgraded. That's really it. The technologies of colonial violence and invasion have upgraded. But I think that where they had the Palestinian informant, who he had a sophisticated knowledge of the neighborhood, of who lived where. He's pointing, he's literally guiding these occupying soldiers, these invaders. He's guiding them throughout this village that he knows intimately. And today we know we have Palestinians who collude with the Israeli state, Palestinians who join the IDF. We know often Israel will blackmail Palestinians and force them into IDF conscription or other scenarios. Another really great show, Rami, has an episode in which they go to Palestine, and his uncle in the show, who is in the closet because he's homosexual, the Israelis try to blackmail him and they don't allow him into Palestine because of that. And that happens every day. So we see the same exact stuff that was happening in the Nakba is still happening today. There's an entire Palestinian Authority, which is sort of just like an, neo-colonial, like mirror mini militia of the IDF at this point. We have hundreds of Ethiopian Jews now who have joined the Israeli occupation forces. We have Hebrew Israelites soldiers. We have Hebrew Israelites from the US who are flying and trying to set up settlements and camps in Israel, and Israel is making deals with them. I need people to understand this. Israel has allowed for Hebrew Israelites to create settlements in Israel strictly they do not give a shit about Black people, let alone Hebrew Israelites, but they understand the optics and the propaganda and the geopolitics of it all. And so,
hold on, excuse me, Dev, because I got to respond to somebody else in the chat here who I agree with.
The fuck is he talking about?
That's bananas.
Yo,
that's bananas.
Look.
Exactly.
Literally here in Atlanta, I'm not going to say the name of the business. I'm not going to do all that. There is several Hebrew Israelite businesses in Atlanta, one of which was founded by some Black Hebrew Israelites who came from a settlement in Israel and lived there for 20 years, then came back here to start a business and help support the settlement back there. So these things are like very active and current. And so when I saw that informant, and mind you, the informant, while he's snitching on everybody and he himself was in chains, right? Like he was handcuffed.
And hooded.
So you're doing all this for what? You're selling out your own people for what, right?
He's depicted as often as the case in films like this, that of a similar, trajectory, that they don't depict this particular history, but they show them as being conflicted and thinking that they're doing the best they can to alleviate the harm. And so he after the worst of the atrocities, he vomits, he's sick, he's himself not, saying, you promised me you wouldn't do this and that and the third. And I get but I also can, to a certain extent, can step back and objectively see how people could be convinced to perform that role. That, the horror or the trauma of the invasion, the thought you might do some good, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I get it, but damn, I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
I did want to make sure there's one other piece, because I know as Dev, I think you mentioned earlier, you talked about that this film comes out of an oral history passed to pass down from the grandmother of the filmmaker. And I thought from this iMWiL article, and again, I'll put both of them in the show description, because there are details that they go into in terms of the film and the history that are they're just, I think, beyond what I feel capable of reading right now. But even in talking about the Tantura massacre, which is referenced as a real event that reminds people that what is shown in the film is mild. They talk about the use of oral history here, and as the author writes, citing Israeli historian Omer Bartov about the use of oral history in the reconstruction of the Holocaust, quote, "The memory of trauma is often murky, unstable, contradictory, untrustworthy. What we learn from memoirs of camp survivors are not the fine details of camp administration, train schedules, ideological purpose, and genocidal organization. These are matters far better left for historians. What we learn is the infinity of pain and suffering that makes the memory of those years into a burden whose weight stretches far beyond the ephemeral human existence, a presence that clings to the mind and inhabits the deep recesses of consciousness long after it should have been cleansed and washed away." As someone who doesn't pretend to write well, I'd like to think I can appreciate good writing. I very much like how that is written and what is said there, and what is the point that is ultimately depicted in this film, when there are others who are critical of it and want to say, look, it's not a historical thing, we don't have proof, these detail, that detail, you don't have That's not the point. As was very well said there, the oral histories convey as I'll simplify, the general trauma that is accurately depicted in the film. And if this or that particular detail is not exactly correct, that's irrelevant. Worse atrocities happen and continue to happen. And that someone suffering those atrocities might not get every detail right and doesn't have the time to document and record and get multiple sources as they're suffering the trauma. So be it, because the reality is still perfectly well conveyed through time. So I just wanted to make sure to add that into our discussion here before we start to wrap up. But any thoughts about any of that, or responses, or anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like that's actually, it kind of hits 2 points that I think this movie got really well, which is one that not only did you see some of how like occupation and ethnic cleansing were being carried out, like you see some of how they're using informants and how they like came into the village, but really it's that the point that quote you just gave emphasized, which is you're really getting this movie from the perspective of a 14-year-old girl. And so we're exactly like you said, we're not seeing every atrocity in the neighborhood. Matter of fact, we can't even see everything that's happening in the courtyard of this house. Yeah, we're getting this tiny window, which is kind of like the perspective that the latter half of the movie is shot from. So not only are you getting like that intimate, personal, like the sadness, the tragedy that that Farha herself is feeling, we're also getting very little detail about like all of the atrocities that might have occurred at this time, because we're getting it through that little window. And so in the same way that I, as like a diasporic Palestinian, have only heard through that oral tradition you described about my grandmother's experience, how my grandmother never wore makeup after the Nakba, you know, like because of the scale of tragedy. And as you'll find many Palestinian women also in the same way, just as like a protracted commemoration of the tragedy, to like to avoid beautifying themselves, etc. In the same way that I've also only gotten a small window through oral history into the tragedies that occurred without getting the full scale of it all. In the same way, I think that movie gives you a taste of a taste of the same. You're only getting that small window into the courtyard, and there's already tragedy enough. So I like that the movie did that, and I feel like it speaks to the quote you just gave, that my experience also as a Palestinian, especially diasporic, gives me that only little window into the full scale of tragedy.
And to something you even just said, one of the comments in that same article from a Palestinian woman, she says, that, again, to this point about the specifics and the details, she says, this happened to everybody. Like all of us have this story. So whether you think she got everything right or not, it doesn't matter, because something like that and worse happened to me, to him, to her, to them. I mean, so anyway, and even when you say window, like it's not, I mean, it's like a hole. I mean, I don't want to convey that she's sitting, you know, some, you know, big, you know, with curtains, and she's just chilling in a seat. No, she's tucked away, stuffed in a I guess what would have been a storage closet at the time. I don't know, like a pantry. You know, a pantry, right? And there's very little for her to see, and little for her to hear, which is again why, and this is what I was even trying to tell my children, separate from the content of the film, like why I like these kinds of films, like. And even as one of you mentioned, this is not a big blockbuster, but that to me is what makes a film better. There's not a lot of, there's no CGI, and there's no missiles, and you just are forced to deal with good acting, good storytelling, obviously a compelling narrative. I mean, all of it is done very, the use of even sound from the steps above, when you like I mean, I thought they did everything was so well done, to create the fear, and as you said, Dev, there's only 3 or 2 whatever sets, like it's not, you know, and yet you don't feel it. It's not like anyway, it's just, I was just in a constant state of terror and trauma. So I was like, I wasn't worried about like how, you know, where I was just like, oh my God. And anyway, very good film, very powerful film. And I think everybody has to watch it at least once. I can't promise to say I'll see it again, but everybody has to see it at least once, and has to encourage that people see it and deal with it, and be inspired by it in the way that I think we in this collective space would know to be inspired, you know. So
you know, I think I prefer TV to movies. I don't watch a lot of movies. I didn't even have a Netflix subscription, had to sign up for a trial to watch this, and you know, make sure everyone watches it, go and rate it 5 stars on iMDb, because there is a huge downvoting campaign coordinated by Israelis and the Israeli state, telling people to go and downvote it. But you know, with less budget, you're forced to be creative. You're forced to do good storytelling and build a compelling narrative, right? Like if you watch a Marvel film and they have $100 million worth of CGI, where is the artistic value in that? Where is the creative value in that? You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm just using Marvel as an example because it literally has warped people's perceptions of what a movie should be at this point, you know? I think something else that we should definitely point out, though, is in the time of this big, large discussion taking place, you know, about anti-Semitism, Kanye, Kyrie, all these different things that's taking place, and you have these campaigns to cancel or remove people from platforms and all that, Israel is using these exact same right-wing tactics right? This idea of creating a false campaign against something to get it taken down or censored. This is a censorship campaign, and it's a tactic that right-wing, far-right fascists are honing and are using the most. You remember just 2 weeks ago, there was a list of hundreds of Twitter accounts from people on the left that they are trying to mass report and get taken down. My name was on there. Tons of people who, you know, who talk about politics, who I know were on that list. But these are like coordinated campaigns. So we have Israel. How can you call anti-Semitism while at the exact same time using right-wing fascist tactics? To me, that presents a high-level contradiction and a lot of irony. But we have them literally using and recreating these same tactics. And so it also shows us on the left, right, where we need to be paying attention to, what we need to be learning how to respond to in a coordinated and organized effort as well. And I think that as this veneer falls more and more from the Israeli state and the sheer contradictions become plain to see to the naked eye and the violence Palestinians face, we're going to get more films like this. We're going to have more Palestinians at home and in the diaspora emboldened to create films, music, writing that challenge dominant Israeli narratives and Zionist narratives throughout the world. So how do we, in our organizations, in our, you know, comradely circles, how do we support these things, right? Like, how do we make sure that we're not letting these things fall on deaf ears and blind eyes, to say, you know? So anyways, that was a long spiel, but the point is, go watch the movie. It was really good. Rate it 5 stars. And, you know, I encourage people, watch it with a group of people and then talk about it afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, it's the kind of film, it reminds me of, in elementary school, there were all those different films we had to watch, like the Boy in the Striped Pajamas, you know, Anne Frank, all these films. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen one that is from a Palestinian girl's perspective, the same way I've never seen one from a 14-year-old girl in the Gold Coast of Africa, right? This is also what the film made me think of as I'm currently reading Walter Rodney's History of the Upper Guinea Coast. And he's talking about how European invasion of the Guinea Coast began with these subtle trickery, briberies before being all-out warfare. And I'm watching this film and I think, wow, in the same way I've never seen this narrative, I've never seen anyone attempt that narrative before. So there has to be, you know, a correlation there, right?
I thought the same. You know, it's funny you said that. I thought a lot of those similar things, including I thought as I was watching the film, I said how hypocritical it is that people would be, Israelis included, would be upset at a film that's depicting a Palestinian Anne Frank. Basically. And I was like, but that's why, because then you would have to recognize that the Israeli soldiers are Nazis. And that's why they're like, nah, we see what you're trying to do. You're trying to Anne Frank a Palestinian girl. Nah, that makes us the Nazis. Yeah, that's not gonna work. But that's really what it was. I mean, that's what it was. Yeah. Except she lives. You know, so I mean, but anyway, Abu, any last thoughts for today? And I would definitely like to have you come back and hear more just about your work. I'm you know, newly being introduced here, so I think just in even what Dev said about your work would be a fascinating discussion. I'd love to you know, have anyway. But go ahead. Any?
No. Thank you so much. And seriously, it's a great honor to be on. I would love to. And yes, like last points on the movie, it was gripping. It was suspenseful. I like the production, like Dev was saying. I think form follows function. The fact that there is such a big move against like funding movies like this or uplifting movies like this is why you have the budget that you did to get this kind of story shot from this perspective. I'm sure is part of it as well. And so I think that was great. And I would absolutely love to come on. A lot of the work that I've done in the West Bank and refugee camps is regarding like pre-hospital care and overcoming those daily barriers to accessing both like primary care services, but also emergency medicine services, midwifery services, like the actual barriers to actually having a child in these areas of the world. And so I'm more than happy to discuss all of those. It's a pleasure to meet you. And
no, likewise. That's absolutely, definitely want to do that. And it reminds me, I got to get my my other buddy who does who's similarly situated medically in the world to come on. We got you know, a lot of folks that do real work are not quick to want to get on a camera. So I would appreciate, I would appreciate that. Dev, thank you very much for putting this together. And encouraging me and us to watch this film. I'm very glad I did. As difficult as it was, it has to happen. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to big up my friend Abu. He is one of those working people who does not like to show his face on camera. So thank you for coming today and joining me. And I actually, if people listen to the Groundings podcast, you may recognize Abu from the episode I did on Palestine, where me and him co-interviewed Mohammed Al-Kurd. So definitely check that out if you haven't. Abu is a brilliant thinker as well as doctor. Be giving me free medical care sometimes, all that good stuff. so yeah, shout out.
Seriously, thank you all. Just trying to get like y'all.
Hey, no, it's a pleasure. Look, as always, to those who were here with us, and to the two of you, like Fred said, peace, because I know you're willing to fight for it. Thanks to our guests earlier in the show talking about Mumia, free him, and people show up on Friday in Philly if at all possible. Links and all of that will be in the show description. But until next time, peace, everybody. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like and all throughout BPM. Thanks, everybody. Take care. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.